His mustache is fabulous. It was actually very sad. It was so, not actually a sharp object, literally a hand. Hi guys, welcome back to another Rants video. Today we're going to be talking about essentially the Hercule Poirot series of detective movies. There's been 3 of them so far. I'm honestly hoping for more because detective movies don't get made that often anymore, and when they do, they're not necessarily all that great, they're predictable or whatever else, and these are actually good. So we're gonna go quickly through the first 2 and probably focus on Haunting in Venice because that's the one that I just watched like a week or 2 ago, depending on when I release this video. But yes, Murder on the Orient Express is probably one of the first real detective movies that I've watched that I can remember, at least. I know I probably watched mystery movies before, but none super memorable, and this is the first really memorable one. It was really cool to have this concept of trapped on this, just the way the set was set up and having the train and kind of feeling like they're trapped on this train and having everyone trapped there and having him go through interview each character and getting to see how they interact with him and how they answer the questions. It was really, really cool, and the ending was great with this reveal of everyone did it and everyone is responsible because they all have this connection to a victim from a case that was done years ago, and having Mr. Poirot faced with this choice of, do I reveal them because they murdered someone, or do I let them go because they were just trying to get justice for something that never got resolved in their family? They were trying to get closure for everyone involved in this because so many people were hurt by this one crime. And it's so good. And the actor for Hercule Poirot is great, and his mustache is fabulous, and it's just wonderful. And it has a very impressive cast, and it's Daisy Ridley as an actually good character. And is it Leslie Odom Jr.? I think, whoever plays Burr in Hamilton. He's also a character in there. And whoever plays Green Goblin in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and I guess technically No Way Home too, but I don't remember. Willem Dafoe, that's who it is. And just, there's a few like big name actors, and it's all so cool. And Josh Gad plays a character that isn't absolutely annoying to me. And the main villain, I guess you could call him, is excuse me, is Johnny Depp. But yeah, it's so good, and I didn't see any of it coming, but it was really fun because I went to watch it with a friend of mine, and we have the little scene where he solves a mystery at the beginning of the movie. She called who did that one, and then we were watching it, and she, before it was revealed, totally called that it was going to be everyone. And I'm the kind of person that doesn't theorize a whole lot when I'm watching something. It's really after the fact, when I've taken it all in and have time to just sit and mull things over, that I really get to think about stuff. In the midst of what is happening, I don't really, my brain is just focused on what's happening, and things are constantly moving and happening on screen, that I don't get a moment to just sit back and take in what's happened and what information we've gotten. And so I will predict things that will happen in the movie, but not necessarily the culprit or the resolution or whatever the goal of the story is to find out. I'm just there taking things in, but more information comes in before I can process what I already took in, and so I don't have time to actually put things together and make a theory or anything about it because my brain just keeps moving, I guess. And so I didn't predict anything technically in that movie. or any of these, just, okay, never mind, not in any of these. I didn't not definitely not. But in Murder on the Orient Express, yeah, I didn't call anything, but my friend did, which was very fun. She was very proud of herself. But yeah, Murder on the Orient Express is great. And then we have Death in the Nile, which honestly, of the three of them, I think is the weakest. Partially because it was a little bit more predictable, I think, than the other two. Because it's this one couple, essentially, that's responsible for all the death and stuff that happens. And from the beginning, I knew at least one of them was involved. And then when it got around to the reveal, I wasn't surprised that the other one was involved and that they were doing this together. And I really, yeah. And so it wasn't as, I guess, intriguing as the rest of them, because the entire time I knew what was happening and I knew what was going to happen. And story-wise, I think it was probably the weakest. It wasn't quite as interesting as the other two stories were. Because it was a little more run-of-the-mill detective movie where it's just a murder out of spite or jealousy or whatever else, whereas the other two have a much more interesting motive or whatever for what cause or whatever that happened, and that made them more interesting and more intriguing to me. And so I guess Death in the Nile was good. I just felt flat for me. It had freaking Gal Gadot. She did great, even if she died shortly into the movie. But yeah, the best part of that, and this is gonna sound horrible, is when Book died, which was Hercule Poirot's best friend, who you meet in the first movie, who gets him on the train and so does essentially starts the whole Murder on the Orient Express storyline and whatever else. And so he's involved in this one again, obviously, and he gets killed. And that's the most impactful part of the movie for me, because I do care about Book, because we got him for 2 movies, and so I got into his character a little bit more. And then we lost him in a really sad way, and it's just because he saw who did it. And so they came back around and they had to kill him so he wouldn't tell. And it was really sad. It was actually very sad. I think part of the reason that I don't necessarily like this one as much either is because several different aspects of the story that are kind of side plots or just scenes or whatever, and I wasn't a huge fan of. Gal Gadot and her husband or whatever, they're doing a cruise on the Nile as their honeymoon, I guess. And they're at this temple, and her husband decide, we're gonna go onto this ledge that's hundreds of feet in the air, and we're gonna sort of do it just a little bit. Not quite, because they're on a 2-foot ledge, but as close as you could get, essentially. So they're doing some suggestive things on this ledge, and it very much it served a purpose, because we have this crooked dude that worked for her or whatever, who is bitter or something, and so he was like, ooh, opportunity, and in an act of rage he tries to kill her, which is meant to distract you from the obvious culprit. And so that was the only purpose that scene really served, but it didn't necessarily have to be that kind of scene, but it was. So, I don't know. I wasn't a fan of the choice they made for how that scene played out. That's just my personal opinion. I had a whole rant about this kind of stuff in my Pillars of the Earth video, so those of you who watched that know exactly why I have a problem with it. The other thing was they made to this lady and her servant, essentially, they made them a thing which didn't add to the story, didn't make sense. He was explaining a reason behind it, but it didn't seem to have any bearing on about the murder or whatever else. It was just to show how smart he was that he figured that thing out, because there really wasn't anything romantic seeming to go on. It was just so that was a very unnecessary part of the story. I think that was just not unnecessary. It was very unnecessary. And then the third one was so we have, I don't know Sherry's actress's name, but she is a character in this. She is the manager essentially for her grandma. I think it's her grandma, but she's a singer. Anyway, so they're along, and this girl, Sherry's character, and Book have love interest, and there's a whole concept of Book's mother is along, and she hired Poirot to follow Sherry's character and find out what kind of woman she was, because Book's mother did not want him getting involved with a black woman. And it was very much, again, not super necessary and didn't really add to the story, but it was there. And so it exists. And I wasn't a huge fan of that either. Like, I don't know. I feel like there are little trails that went off the main branch that didn't need to be there, and almost just distracted from the main story that was happening. And that's really, yeah, that's honestly what took away from the story, and that's why Death in the Nile is probably my least favorite of the three, just because it's a little bit disjointed, and some of the choices made weren't necessarily the greatest in my opinion, and it falls flat a little bit with storyline. So yeah. Death in the Nile was a decent movie. It was done well, and it was still an enjoyable movie, but I don't know, it fell flat for me in most ways. Hercule Poirot is always great. But yeah. Alright. Honestly, we're doing Hunting in Venice now. Hunting in Venice is fantastic. I honestly cannot decide if I like Murder on the Orient Express better or this one better, because they have such different feels to them. Because Murder on the Orient Express is and Death in the Nile, very much your stereotypical like detective feel. We're trying to solve this murder. And then we have Haunting in Venice, which goes horror with it. Hence the title. But they're going through, they're in this old house that everyone says is haunted or cursed or both, and they're trying to figure out, because there's a spiritual medium that shows up because this lady is desperate to talk to the ghost of her daughter, because her daughter died 10 years ago. And this spiritual medium is, doing all her things, trying to fool people, and then says something about murder. And because she supposedly comes into contact with the daughter's ghost, and she starts saying, you murdered me, but doesn't get around to telling them who. And so we're going through this whole thing, trying to decide, are ghosts actually a thing? Or is this really ghosts happening? Or is this some sort of extreme, huge trick? It's honestly so great. This whole time they're going through this, and they're seeing things and they're hearing things, and it's like, is this real? Am I actually hearing things? Am I actually seeing these things? What on earth is happening? And then the medium gets murdered right before all the craziness starts. Someone tries to kill Hercule Poirot because he's wearing her cloak and mask, the medium's cloak and mask that she came in, and someone tries to kill the medium. by drowning her, but they mistake Hercule for her because of the cloak. And so someone attempts to kill him and then go back and actually get their target, which is really fun because they push her off a balcony and she impales herself on the hand of a statue. So not actually a sharp object, literally a hand of a statue, which is really, yeah. It's a bit graphic. It's kind of fun. But yeah, they go through that trying to figure out who killed this medium and discover partially too to see if what she said about the daughter being murdered is true. And that's not how it starts, but it's kind of how the book shifts as they go through and they start seeing and hearing all of these things that like can't be possible unless they were explained by ghosts and spirits and whatever else. It's really, really good. We're gonna spoil this one. We're gonna spoil this one because it's great. I will just say it's great. I didn't expect the ending at all, or who did it or whatever else. I did call, because 2 people die. I did call the second person dying. It was pretty obvious when they had the whole thing happening, but yeah, it was fine. That was the only thing I really predicted, and then everything else is out of nowhere. Okay. Well, not out of nowhere, but like, I did not expect that. Okay. Spoiler warning! If you have not watched Haunting in Venice, I suggest not watching the remainder of this video because I will be ranting about the ending and how they explain things and how great that was. So, goodbye. See you, come back later when you've watched it. But it's so good. It's great because we have hallucinogenic honey. Literally drug honey. Honey made of drug flowers that makes people hallucinate. And it turns out all these things that they're seeing and hearing throughout the movie is because Hercule Poirot was drugged with honey in tea. Which explains all this, and so we go through that, and that explains away all of these things that he's seen. And it turns out the mother is responsible for everything that has happened, including the death of her daughter, because she was drugging her daughter to keep her innocent and dependent, to keep her away from her ex-fiance, who she doesn't think is a great person. And then she goes to get some rest and leaves her maid or whatever in charge, and her maid, not knowing the truth about all of this, gives the daughter too much honey, which kills her because it's essentially an overdose, and then gets scared by something, all these creaks and noises happening in the house because it's haunted, and so she leaves because the daughter's sleeping. It's fine. Not knowing that she unintentionally has killed this girl. And so the mother comes back, finds her dead, and goes, "Oh crap, they can't find out it's me." Throws her out of the 3rd-story window into the water to stage that she drowned instead of being drugged. And then proceeds to get a blackmail letter from someone. It's like, oh crap, they know. I need to cover this up. I need to stop them. So she pays her entire fortune to this person to keep them quiet. And then when all the medium and stuff shows up, she starts to kind of get suspicious about who it is. So she kills the spiritual medium because she mentioned murder. She knows, and so she kills the medium. And then she kills a doctor who examined her daughter's body when she pushed her out of the river, and who had been taking care of her daughter this whole time, and goes, "He found out. He must have found out." He's an interesting character. He is an ex-military doctor, and so he's got a lot of PTSD, which is fun to have that aspect going on as well throughout the whole thing. But he gets killed as well because she thinks he's the one that's blackmailing me. And the medium knew too much because she is fully convinced that he's real. And by the end of it, we find out that the guy that she thought was blackmailing her, it was really his son, his 11-year-old, something-year-old son, who is just super smart. And we have this whole conversation between him and Hercule Poirot where he's figured it out and goes, don't blame yourself for what happened. You remind me of me. Don't blame yourself. You didn't kill your father. She did. And the characters are actually very great in this one. I wasn't the biggest fan of the characters in Death and Denial. I don't know. They're just bland, I guess, to me. And the ones in Murder on the Orient Express were pretty great. Especially at the end of it when it all comes together. These ones were also very great and very individual. Because we have this doctor that has PTSD and we have his son, who's just essentially a mini Hercule Poirot. And then we have the medium's assistants who make everything just possible, who are just trying to escape to America and find some freedoms. The mother, obviously, who is desperate to hang on to her little girl. Her fiance who is trying to come back and apologize. But, acts like a little bit of a douche to everybody. And then the maid, who is very, very spiritual. So she's not entirely, she does sort of believe in all of the demons and stuff, but she doesn't think connecting with them is something that we should do. And so we have her from the beginning going, being this medium, trying to connect to the spirits and all of the ghosts in this house. That's not a good thing. So she's a very interesting character. And then, then we also have the author, who is Hercule Poirot's friend, who has based some of her books off of his cases. And so she's the one that dragged him to this so that she would try and get him into this case or whatever so that she would have another book to write. And then also the Hercule Poirot's bodyguard. Because he hired a bodyguard because he tried to go into retirement. So he had a bodyguard keeping everybody off and keeping cases away from him. And it turns out that the author, the medium, and his bodyguard had been working together to create this case, essentially, so that she could have this book, the woman who stumped Hercule Poirot. That was her goal. And then it falls apart because he figures out their plan. The medium didn't actually stump him. And so we find out the author's really not a great person. She's willing to do anything to get a best-selling book. And she's super bitter because the last 3 she wrote since Hercule retired haven't been bestsellers. And so that is an example of how the side plot works and fits into the story seamlessly, because it's already a part of the main story that's happening, but it has this different overarching thing that we didn't know about. So it connects and perfectly and seamlessly into the main story. It's written like it's just a part of the main story, and then we find out that there's this whole other reason for it happening than the actual main events of the story. And so that's really cool. And that's an example of how side plots and stuff are supposed to be done. So it was done very, very well in this one, unlike how it was done in Death and Denial, where it seemed a little more disjointed and didn't actually seem to fit very well into the main storyline. So, yeah. Haunting in Venice was just great. It was so good. And I honestly really, really liked the horror feel of it. and the concept of the flowers just being turned into drug honey, and I really, really liked it. It was very good. Again, I can't decide if I like Murder on the Orient Express or this one better. This one is definitely, I think, a bit more original as far as detective movies go because of the horror feel of it. But they both have really, really cool and intriguing and different stories for how all these events actually came about. And so they're both really good. Honestly, I think I may have enjoyed Haunting in Venice a little bit more. Maybe because I do sometimes lean more toward the thriller side of movies a bit, and I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I think I do kind of enjoy Haunting in Venice a little bit more. This one and Murder on the Orient Express are both definitely great and fantastic and like top tier detective movies. Death in the Nile was good, but not the greatest. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Hercule Poirot movies. Hopefully there will be more to come because they're all cool and they do all have their very own specific feel and their own. Yeah, and they're all unique and very cool, and Hercule Poirot is just a fantastic character, and I love getting to see him and his fantastic mustache all the time. It's great. But yeah, those are my thoughts on those movies. If you have watched all of them as well, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you came up with theories, if you were right about different things, if you like called the culprits and whatever else in any of them, feel free to drop those in the comments, as well as any requests that you might have along the lines of songs, movies, shows, books, whatever that I should sing, review, make videos about. I post videos every Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll see you all next time.